Hey, it's me. It's animated me. I'm your host, Andy Burrows, and it's time for another episode of Completed It. Movie reviews, pop culture, celebrity guests, and all that good stuff. Oh, and my good friend over there, Sasha Alari, that's my co-host. Hey, Satch, hit the titles, brother. Welcome everybody back to another episode of Completed It. Yes, I'm your host Andy Burrows, and I'm flying solo this week, host-wise. My co-host Sasha Alari, he has gone on a well-earned vacation. He is off in India, but I haven't come alone. I've kind of gone back, and shall we say, back to the future? I guess our very special guest is none other than Jeffery Weissman. Jeffrey, welcome to the show, sir.
Mr. Burrows, hello.
How are you, my friend? Thank you so much for joining the Completed It.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all, my friend. No problem at all. Jeff, you to say that you've had an interesting career when it comes to the Back to the Future. It's a story that you we often hear the Crispin Glover side of things, which I think we've all heard and we all respect. But for those people that don't know, Jeffrey was drafted in, shall we say, to be Crispin Glover's character, George McFly, in Back to the Future 2 and 3. It was an issue that was brought up after the film was made. Not, no, they wanted to keep it top secret that Crispin wasn't going to be George McFly in the second and third movie. And then we all know what happened after it. Crispin found out there was a lawsuit, everything that went on. I mean, I've watched and heard multiple interviews with Crispin, and fair play to him, he's come out and said what he said. But Jeffrey, from your side of things, give us your story because it's a story that's been told, but I don't feel that it's been told enough from what you had to do. You basically were brought into this sequel of what had been a smash hit film with Back to the Future and basically said, hey, Jeff, we're going to mold someone's face and we're going to put it on your face and you're kind of going to be George McFly, but we're not going to tell everyone. Just explain to me how this all come about from your side of things.
Well, I wish it was that easy. It wasn't explained to me at all, really. I had to figure things out and read in between the lines and such. When I was first, I suppose I should go back in time even further and explain that in 1983, I did a film at the American Film Institute with Crispin Glover and Dan O'Herlihy. And I thought Crispin was a fascinating actor and told him I wanted to stay in touch and got his number. And then in 1984, I shot Pale Rider with Clint Eastwood playing cowboy. And I wanted to see what the summer competition was. So I went and saw Back to the Future. And there was Crispin knocking it out of the park as George McFly. I called him up. I congratulated him. Then forward to 1988, I got a call from an agent that had helped me get lookalike work. I was working at Universal Studios playing Stanley Laurel, Charlie Chaplin, Groucho Marx, etc. And in the conversation, the agent asked me if I knew who Crispin was. I said, of course, we're friends. He asked if I thought I was the same height and weight, and I said, no, he's taller and heavier, and so on and so forth. But I knew that Paradox, which was the original title of Back to the Future 2 and 3, was in pre-production. And in fact, one of the headlines I remember in Variety, the Hollywood Rags, was that the studio had thrown so much money at all the principals to reprise their roles, they were calling it Back to the Bank.
Oh, wow.
And the first film was the highest grossing film of 1985. So Universal really wanted the team to come back and make these sequels. So I knew that was in pre-production and I needed work. I needed to get my medical qualified for my Screen Actors Guild medical because my wife was having our second child at the time. So I needed to get more hours. So I even called Crispin up and I said, look, I'm up for being your stand-in photo double. Say a good word for me. And I didn't hear back from him, but I started going through the process. I went first and met with the assistant directors who liked my resume and my professional attitude. And then I went to casting and read the scene from the first film where Marty and George are hanging the laundry in the
Hmm.
backyard. And that apparently went well. And then I started being sent to um, makeup to have molds taken of my face, and then a body cast mold, and then wigs. And I had a screen test then in the young George makeup. And it was during that screen test that I heard Robert Zemeckis ask Dean Cundy, the cinematographer, "What do you think, Dean?" And Dean says, "I think we have Crispin without the trouble." I was like, "What is that supposed to mean?"
What?
You know. And then my makeup artist, Ken Chase, who designed all the makeups, uh, he was the one who actually said, "Crispin's out. You're going to be George." I was like, "That's not possible. How can they? No, they can't do the thing without Crispin as George. That's insane." But slowly but surely, it came to pass where I was hired. I was actually disappointed because I loved Crispin's work
Hmm.
in the first film, and I couldn't understand how they were going to get through it. In my mind at the time, I thought they needed George maybe at multiple places at the same time, so
Hmm.
they would have me and Crispin like they did with Michael, because Mike's photo double Kevin Holloway was a pretty good ringer for Mike. So when you see Mike in part two open the door and knock himself out, or he's Marty's up on the catwalk and while he's playing Johnny B. Good on stage in the Enchantment Under the Sea dance recreation, uh, it's either Mike or Kevin.
Hmm.
The Kevin looked close enough to Mike that even from a side angle he looked like uh, Michael J. Fox. So I was wrong, and now I read in the trades about this time that Crispin couldn't get out of scheduling conflict on another film. Whether or
Hmm.
not that's true or not, I really don't know. Um, but there I was. I asked to do this role, and I was thrown in literally in the 11th hour. Now that I see it with 35 years behind us, I see that they didn't know if they had him or not. In my scripted paradox, there are rewrites that are, they take all of George's lines away. A lot of people also think to set the record straight and urban legend correct, George wasn't hung upside down to obscure that it was a different actor.
Hmm.
They'd always wanted Crispin to be hung upside down in that ortho level of the future because apparently, as the story I've heard, is that he would, Crispin's a very intense actor, and he would often be so wrapped up in being alive in his character that he would undershoot or overshoot his marks for camera. And that would drive the directors and producers crazy. And so they thought, well, if we have him on this ortho lev of the future, we could put him on a rail that goes from the outside of the front door through the living room and into the kitchen, and we can control his movements. And that way he'll always be in frame and on camera focused and so on and so forth. So just setting that urban legend
Hmm.
straight, it wasn't to obscure that there was another actor. I endured better part of 2 weeks, at least 6 or 7 days over a 2 week period, hanging upside down.
Wow. What was it?
24.
Obviously, so when you found out about what was going on, because it's been very well documented now. Crispin's come out and said it was illegal what they done. If he's come out and been on record in saying, look, if they'd cast another actor, he would have been fine with it. Not an issue. He would have been still at all the conventions now, hugging people, taking pictures, etc., etc. So was it kind of a double-edged sword for you? Because A, on one hand, you knew Crispin, you're friends with him. B, on the other hand, you want to work. So when you kind of put everything together and you found out what was going on, was there a part of you that turned round to someone like a Bob Gale and said, hang on a minute, this isn't right? I mean, how did
Yeah.
that fit in with your psyche kind of thing?
Well, I did feel something was not right. And in fact, I get that shared title card at the beginning of part two with James Tolkien. I had to negotiate that myself on set with Robert Zemeckis.
Oh wow.
And I remember right after I did that, Bob Gale and Neil Canton, the producers, came over and said, "What are you doing talking your credit with the director? That's not his place. I thought that you come to us." And I said, "Well, my agent dropped the ball on that, and I needed to not take a step back in my
Hmm.
career. I had co-star billing with Clint Eastwood and Pale Rider and John Lithgow and in Twilight Zone movie, etc." And Zemeckis agreed to the shared title card, and he didn't luckily back off on that, and I appreciate that. But I then realized I was having some difficulty getting traction on promoting myself. I had a 10 city mall tour that I was promoting for promoting Universal Florida, where I was going to play my different character, Charlie Chaplin and Groucho Marx, and promote my participation in Back to the Future 2. And mysteriously, the plug was pulled on that. And then I couldn't get my photos. Often you can request photos
Hmm.
for your art, scrapbook or promotion. And it took me over 6 months to
Wow.
get photos, which on previous other films, it takes maybe 2 weeks at the most. So things were shifty and weird. And I, after part three came out, a year after finishing my work mostly on part two, was asked to do the little quick cameo in part three. And after part three came out, Crispin called me
Oh,
and said, it's not fair what they did to me. And I said, well, what did they do? And it was then that I learned that he made no agreement for use of his life mask in those makeups.
wow. So the film had been out, everything, and you still were unaware of what had gone on prior to
Yeah.
you making the
Well,
movie.
once again, I played Stanley Laurel and Hardy, Groucho Marx, Charlie Chaplin. Universal always paid for the licensing for the use
Hmm.
of those likenesses for promotional and legal reasons. And I figured, they had taken care of business and they hadn't. And I just felt that was wrong. And also, Crispin cried that they had spliced my work with a couple of close-ups of him for
Hmm.
the 1955 scenes, and they were going to pay him, I think, $1,000 or scale for a day's work or something for the reuse of that footage. And I'm like, my God, what? This was the highest grossing film of 55 of 85, the first film, and then the sequel and part three, they they were grossing great money as well. I think the trilogy is now well over $1 billion
Mm.
worldwide. So it seemed really petty and cheap and all. But then again, I would have crew and producers come to me and tell me stories about how Crispin was a pain on the first film, how this torture hanging upside down was meant for him, and how he would disappear when they needed him on days that he was on hold. A lot of demands that he made, a painting that he and Leah did in rehearsal, he brought into the set and insisted to be part of the McFly home. And Zemeckis says, I can't step on my art director's toes, no, and Crispin would blow up. But I get though Crispin's side. He's an
Yeah,
artist.
100%.
He's eccentric or neurotic, but he's an artist, and he wants to make the best possible project, which is good, but it's also not. He wasn't being a team player so much, and I know he also flipped out once on Ken Chase told me that Crispin had fallen asleep, and Ken had some part of hair that was bugging him about Crispin, who never let him touch his hair. He was trimmed it a little bit, and Crispin woke up and threw a fit. So there's stories from both sides. I was kind of in the middle, and it kind of hurt that Crispin never publicly came out and said that he got. I loaned him my photos and told him my stories to help his case. He got his $750,000 settlement before it really went into court.
Mm.
He deposed everyone. I was deposed uh, the first time for I think it was 8 or 9 hours, and the second time another 7 hours or 8 hours. And he kind of tied up everyone, and it didn't, I guess, look good for Universal. So they had the insurance company, settled with him for $750,000. And and he never really kind of gave me any thanks or credit. Whenever talking about the case, he always referred to me as another actor. And then now, more recent years, he's like, "Oh, that guy did a terrible job. I would have never performed like this, and people think it's me."
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Crispin, you turned down the role.
Yeah.
You could have done it. You know, it was
All over because it's like, well, allegedly wanted Michael J. Fox money, wanted, it was all over
I
everything. Like doing my research for this,
I
it's like,
had Steven Spielberg came up to me while we were shooting and said, "So, Crispin, I see you got your $1 million after all." And I was like, "Huh?" And you know, it was kind of snarky for Steven Spielberg to do that to me, but that's when I realized, oh, Crispin was asking for 1 million.
mm,
And I had heard that they were, I think, going to offer him or were offering him 100,000 or 150,000, and he held out for more. I'm not a part of those
of
negotiations,
course,
but I've heard stuff.
yeah. But
So there you have it.
when we honestly, I think it's a story that doesn't get told enough. Your side, because when you look at someone like Leah Thompson, done the story book "We Don't Need Roads," in that book they highlight that even the cast members didn't want to speak to you as in Jeffrey. They were like sort of taken back, not taken back by you, but they were so upset with what had gone
Oh,
on, they wouldn't refer to you by name. They wouldn't refer to you as
yeah,
any. And again, that's not your fault. It's like you've kind of been brought in to do this role. You've been asked by, the producers and the director. You've come in and they're like, we're going to mold your face, etc., etc. What was that like for you? The reaction from the fellow cast members, and obviously, like you say, in Liz Thompson's book, "We Don't Need Roads," it's highlighted quite prominently that they didn't like you per se, and I don't think it was maybe you personally, but they didn't like the situation, and they
well,
kind
I
of took
think
it out on you. Is there any truth in that?
there's a little bit. I think We Don't Need Roads was written by Cassine Gaines, and uh, I helped him, in fact, get a hold of a lot of the cast members for his book, but he let Bob Gale edit the book.
Oh wow.
And for the chapter on me, Bob Gale even says, "I don't know if any of this is true, what Jeffrey's saying, you know, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Bob, what are you doing?" Um, and yeah, there were times, example, when I first came on set in the young George makeup. Uh, I remember seeing me in that makeup and saying, "Oh, Crispin isn't going to like that." Uh, there's the
Wow, there
three
we go.
different
For
faces
those
I
watching on
wore.
YouTube.
Yeah, so there's the young George, the middle-aged George from part three, and then George from 2015. And Mike said, you know, "Crispin ain't gonna like this," and I was like, "Uh-oh." And when we first started shooting the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, Zemeckis would refer to me as Crispin. I remember that was pretty odd. And I said, and I even came up to him. I said, "Bob, I'm Jeffrey. I'm not Crispin." And then I'll show you some footage if you like from the
Yeah, sure.
making of part two documentary that was cut. You'll hear Bob say then on action, "Leah," instead of saying Crispin.
Hmm.
Uh, for action, you want to see this?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
I'll share it with you. Okay, do that. And can you see the screen?
we can. Yeah.
Okay, let's start it up. Hopefully you can hear it too. So here I am in the makeup chair. Nancy Vasta is in the foreground, uh, gluing me in, and Sonny Berman, Ellis Berman, who just died a couple years ago, the famous Berman brothers, were my makeup artists in this shot. Mike Mills, who's working on Leah, facing us on the other chair, and back to us is Kenny Myers, I think, or Marvin Westmore, one of the two. We had really top-notch makeup crew. That's Marvin Westmore. Kenny was probably working on Palm tomorrow. So as you can see, it was a long process. If we had a 9 o'clock call, it'd be in the makeup chair at 4 a.m.
Oh,
and they'd apply all the prosthetics, and then I get a break after 2 hours, have a stretch, go have a breakfast burrito, and then come back and get painted and wig, and then into costume. So it could
Wow.
be, on set by 8:30, 9 o'clock.
This
That
must
I
have
think.
been surreal for the people doing it as well, doing the makeup. They must have been. I wonder if anything went through their mind, thinking, "What on earth is going on here?"
Well, they work very hard, long, long hours. Often we'd have forced calls where we'd have less than 8 hours off in between shoot days. So that no one got any sleep for a lot of that shoot. And here's, getting ready for the young George makeup for the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Mike Mills,
Wow. I don't think we can hear the audio, but we can definitely make out. Wow. Yeah, I don't think we can hear the audio, but I think we can get the. Jeez. Was it surreal when you actually had to start doing the filming part of it? Was that, or was it just go into actor mode and it was like, hey, look, this is the job, this is what I'm paid to do? I mean, what was like the reaction during filming the scenes with the people that you're working with? Obviously, we've just mentioned about what they were like off the camera. Was on the camera, there was no issues.
Yeah, we were working hard. Everyone was working hard when we were recreating the fight
Hmm.
between Biff and George in the parking lot. We would sometimes just run to the video playbacks to make sure that we're matching the first film, and then get back out there and work with the fight choreographer and recreate it as best as we could. Everyone was professional and did their job. It was hard work all around, but it was lovely because there was so much camaraderie and trusted talent. I was kind of the alien, who is this guy, for the first day or two, but after a while, that people saw how hard I was working, and I was brought into the fold, as to where by the end of the first week of shooting, I was hanging out with Mike in his dressing room, telling stories and having a beer. It was good. It was hard work, but it was wonderful to be a part of this incredible ensemble and incredible crew. Uh, if you'd like to see some other photos,
Yeah, oh God, brilliant. Yeah, we can chat away while we're still seeing some photos. That'd be
yeah.
amazing.
So there's the backstage meeting Marty at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. There, I've got to show, like I mentioned, recreating the fight with Biff. I don't know how big that's coming on your
Wow,
screen,
no, that's perfect. Wow.
and we because the young George makeup, uh,
Mm.
didn't look great face on.
Yep.
They would keep me out of focus or in the background. But the profile was definitely off of Crispin's life mask. You could tell
Yeah.
it was definitely his nose and chin and all that. And
What did they think? So once the movie had kind of come out and everything too, and mainly Back to the Future 2, were you allowed to talk about it? Like obviously before it had come out with friends and family, and then it comes out because obviously they were trying to keep it quote unquote secret, but obviously Crispin, we again, like we said at the start of the show, we all know what happened once Crispin had found out. From your side of it, were you allowed to say, "Hey, yep, that was me under there," and like when the movie comes out, I say, "Did you kind of feel like, oh, I've done all this work, but I can't
it,
take the
it,
credit because people don't know it's you."
I tried. I tried. I remember I had a big time publicist that I wanted to work for me to help promote the career and promote the film. And she said, what proof do you have that you're co-starring in this film? And I said, well, uh, I don't have much. I'll write the director. I wrote Zemeckis, care of Amblin, and asked him to initial this letter, just confirming that he agreed to give me the co-star billing. And that apparently pissed everyone off over at Amblin because, yeah, they were obviously keeping me quiet They wouldn't let me, as I mentioned before, do promotions. It it hurt, you know.
Mm.
I remember there was a fundraiser screening of part three, and I asked, you know, can I have tickets, you know, to be part of the cast and crew, and they wanted to charge me $350 for the tickets, and I was like,
No way.
what? I'm kind of a starving actor. I didn't get the millions that others did. Anyway, so we worked, as I mentioned, very hard here. From the pizza scene, you remember when the pizza came out of the hydraulic
Hmm.
4 seconds. I I mentioned I was fitted for a body cast. This is me getting into the body cast. These are my guys, Don and company from ILM. I'd get cinched into this body cast, which had a pole that came out of the back of it that went through the set with a wheel on it on the other side of the set. And over the body cast, they put on my costume, and then I'd be spun upside down for this effect, which was cut from the film. Um, where I got to, Lorraine comes over and says, "George, rotate your axis for dinner. It's bad for your digestion to eat upside down." And so I did my best Crispin tribute and went, "Okay, four," while spinning, um, in that scene. You can see that, in fact, in the deleted uh, scene stuff, bonus material. Pizza is the name of the scene, and you'll
Mm.
see that spin and the laugh. And here you can tell we really worked long, long hours. Mike, of course, was doing the last season of Family Ties during the day, and we had him nights and weekends. And I remember saying, "Mike, when do you sleep?" And he'd say, "In the limousine in between the studios." I was like crazy. So this shot is probably about 3 or 4 in the morning, and you can
Hmm.
see we're tired, we're dog tired. Um, but it was, you know, once again, work had to be done, and we it was remarkable to watch Zemeckis often just sit back and let the actors do their thing. But then if we had a technical problem, he would figure it out. Yeah, one scene in particular when after we've come in to McFly 2015 home, and the projected window, the serene scene there when, excuse me, Leah pulls the shade up and it's a brick wall behind it.
Hmm.
We couldn't get that effect for many, many hours. It took forever to get that effect to work right because you would keep seeing the flash of the slide projector or projector that was projecting the scenes. And it should have been like what we could do now with LED, but it was 1988, so we didn't have that yet. So I remember being excused with the rest of the cast to our, I think it was our third dinner, second or third dinner. So it must have been 4 in the morning. And when we came back, Zemeckis Babzi said, "Leah, and uh, say your line to camera while pulling the cord to the blind, and that linger it out and pull it out from the window just a little bit, and that should give the effect enough time to shut off correctly, and we won't see the flash." And we did. And she got it on the first take, and we were finally able to go home and sleep for a few hours before getting back into the makeup chair.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, was there much interaction with Christopher Lloyd, Michael J. Fox, like for yourself personally? I mean, it must have been weird for them. They've gone from, again, working with Crispin on the first film, and then
Yeah.
to, you turning up on the second film. And again, nothing, I don't think anyone should have anything against you. You were just an actor trying to do a
Well,
job. I mean, what was that interaction like with Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd?
like I mentioned, by the end of the first week, I was hanging out in Mike's trailer, you know, having a beer, him showing me footage of the farm that up in New England that his real estate agent wanted him to consider buying, and I said, "Mike, how do you've been up there to visit?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "How do you feel?" And he goes, "I feel great. I feel like I'm not treated by as anyone special, and I really like that." And I said, "Then you should get it." You know, we had nice rapport by the end of
Hmm.
it. And Mike, anyone who knows him will tell you He's very grounded. He's a very sweet man. He's a very funny man. Loves kidding, and even with the ravages of PD on him, he's still Mike, and he's wonderful. In January, we did our first 40th year anniversary
Mm.
of the trilogy in New Orleans at a Fanboy Expo there. And Mike had just come off his panel with Leah and Chris and Tom and Huey, and was in his cart. And I had to go over and congratulate him on getting his Medal of Freedom. And he grabbed my hand. He said, "I feel like I'm 14 again. I want to go out to the parking lot and dance naked, drink a beer." It's just wonderful. So when those films came out, I was already a fan of Chris Lloyd. I was a
Hmm.
huge Buckaroo Banzai fan and loved Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Chris Lloyd's work and everything. And I told Mike Mills, my main makeup artist, who was the foreman on Beetlejuice. I said, I'd love to meet Chris Lloyd. I'm a huge fan. And he said, "Well, you guys aren't really on in any scenes together, but come out next week to when we're doing the Hill Valley 2015 location shoots over in East LA, wherever we were, or they were, and I'll introduce you." And so I stayed in touch with Mike and got a day set and came out like at 3 in the morning
Mm.
and hung out in the makeup trailer. And then about 4 o'clock, Chris comes into the makeup trailer, and Mike Mills says, "Chris, this is Jeffrey, who's playing George McFly. Uh, Jeffrey, this is Christopher Lloyd." And was like, "I'm so honored to meet you, sir. I'd love your work." And he goes, "Thank you." And then we just stared at each other for a few minutes, and it's like, "Okay, got to go. Bye."
Yeah, awkward silence.
And it wasn't until we did the first cast reunion that I was invited to, along with about 23 other cast and crew, at the Hollywood show in 2008. I think it was 2009, 2008. And then a couple years later, Chris and I and Claudia Wells, who played Jennifer in the first film, were invited as guests to a theater in Beverly Hills, the New Beverly Cinema, who were showing the trilogy. And Chris and I got there early. Claudia was coming from another screening out in Santa Monica, so she wasn't there yet. But the management put Chris and I up in the projectionists booth, and we were up there for about 40 minutes. So it was finally a chance to get to know
Catch up.
Chris, and he, was generally, if he doesn't know you, is very quiet. But I learned up there in that photo booth quite a bit about him, and we got along great, and it was really lovely. Every time we see each other, there's generally another fun thing that goes on. He was being vetted or feted at a film festival near where I used to live in Northern California, and I knew that he at the time collected exotic plants, and my wife, who's a plant nerd, said, don't go until I get back." And she ran out to this place called California Carnivores and got this rare B-52 bomber red Venus flytrap that I brought to Chris. And as I got into the theater, his tribute was going on, and I said, "Chris, here, this is for you." And he saw it, and it was like, "Oh my God!
Great
Oh,
Scott.
thank you." It was really lovely. So then, a year or so later, I saw him at London Film and Comic Con. I said, "Chris, how's that B-52 bomber red Venus flytrap?" And he says, "I killed it.
It's dead.
I'm never home to water it." You know,
Wow, what a story. Jeff, last one on Back to the Future, because I want to ask you a question about Saved by the Bell, which was one of my favorite shows growing up, which
I
I
just want
also.
to show
Ah,
this.
look at that. That is incredible.
This photo was our first reunion, and it was like I said, there were really about 26 of the cast and crew there. But this main group here, as you can see, Frances Lee McCain, who played Stella Baines next to Leah, Lorraine Baines. Down below is Mark McClure, played Dave McFly. I'm behind Leah and next to Mike and Chris, and Claudia, who played Jennifer, and of course James Tolkien, who played Strickland. And this was the first time I think any of us had seen uh, the effects of Parkinson's on Mike.
Hmm.
It really collectively broke our hearts. We
Yeah,
all,
what was that like when that you did like because it's such a tragic. Don't get me wrong, he's dealing with like an absolute champion and a hero. But
yes,
what
yes,
was that
and
like for you being as you're his friends at the end of the day?
well, it was. ultimately wonderful because we saw it's still Mike, but we'd also feel for it because we saw at times while we were talking to him that he'd like have to turn and walk away because the pain was driving him.
Mm,
And that was incredibly hard, but at the same time, it was empowering for us to see it and know how serious this was. And all of us, really across the board, have stepped up to help with fundraisers and his charity and do what we can. I produced a Back to the Future cruise to end Parkinson's in 2015. I've done numerous appearances for Parkinson's fundraisers
wow, that's incredible.
celebrating Back to the Future Part 3. Uh, anyway, it's a kind of a unifying factor, I think, for us. If we hear that
Hmm.
an event that celebrates the fans, celebrates the movies, and raise money for Parkinson's, that we want to be a part of it. And hopefully, Crispin will come around and do one of those
I
events,
hope
which
so. I mean, yeah, I mean, I've seen so many interviews with him saying that that's why he doesn't do conventions. He doesn't nothing to do with Back to the Future, and it's kind, life is very short. I hope it would be one of them moments where he goes, "Hey, look, mistakes were made, and they were, the lawsuit happened, etc., etc." See, I would like to think that one day he could
oh,
come around and be
he
part of
was
the
so
family.
he was so fantastic in that first film, and
Mm.
I don't know. There's bitterness among others that I don't want to even get into, but I want to celebrate the good stuff, like the fans. This is, as far as I know, the only cosplay that I've ever seen of Old George, and
That's
it's
incredible.
a Uber fan in Denmark. Thomas, who's playing the Ortholev, is hanging his 1-year-old boy upside down. Now, the child was not harmed in this. He said that he was upside down for all of maybe 10
Full
seconds to get
disclaimer.
the photo. But that's my Old George cosplayer, the only one I've ever seen, really. Uh,
Wow.
I've had fans 3D fabricate um, an action figure for me, which I thought was very cool. And then there was a Super Bowl halftime show that had, is it 50 Cent hanging upside down?
Yep,
And one of the fans photoshopped me in there with 50 Cent at the halftime thing. Anyway, I
that's
love
incredible.
the celebration that the fans do. And, um, it's been for me quite the ride, as you know, not only for, the tough stuff, but for the celebration. It's been,
Yeah, I mean, there is so much good stuff to take from what you've done from Back to the Future. And obviously, like you say, you've talked about it for years. You've been to Comic Cons. Just quickly, Jeffrey, what was the reaction when the lawsuit hit? When that hits from you personally, and it's all kicking off basically, and you're kind of thinking, shit. What was the reaction from your side of it? Because, like you say, I've heard Crispin's story many times. When that lawsuit is filed, are you kind of thinking? Oh Jesus, what's the kind of reflection from your side of things?
I was in somewhat distress.
Mm,
I was not sure how to tread because I didn't have really. I had my feeling that Crispin was done wrong.
hmm.
I also was afraid for myself being, ridiculed, persecuted by the studio was very powerful, as you know, and it did come to pass that I found out that I was, after it was revealed that I helped Crispin with his case by speaking to his attorney, offering him my photos and stuff that he used for his case. I learned that I was being blacklisted, which was really hard. In fact, my life went into a tailspin. I unfortunately lost the relationship with my first wife, and it took me a few years to pull out of it.
Mm.
Um, but like I said, it was very difficult because Hollywood is kind of unforgiving, and it's a small town, and so word got out, that uh, I helped him out. So and then he turned out to be kind of thankless.
Yeah,
uh, but you asked about Saved by the Bell.
I did honestly, Jeffrey. One of my favorite TV shows growing up, and when I was doing I was like, one of the I think everyone kind of my age will grew up watching Saved by the Bell, and when I heard that you were in it, I went and watched the episode, and here we are. I mean, just talk to us through. You're part of one of the most iconic Well, one iconic movie, and probably one of the most iconic TV shows, but definitely for us growing up here in the UK. And I know it definitely in the stateside. Saved by the Bell still is now. I still talk to people about that show.
Oh, fun. It really was a strange episode that I was going to be on. It was called Rockumentary. Myself and Casey Kasem were the guest stars, and I was originally going to play two roles on that episode. One where the kids have grown, and they kind of this is a sort of a fantasy futuristic story for them. And I was going. They form a rock band, and each one of them has their different successes from that and how they deal with success. And Elizabeth Hurley's character and I were supposed. I was going to play a character named David, and we're on a date. And she's all about saving the whales and environmental awareness and all this. And I make some wrong moves and insult her, and she dumps me, David. And then I was going to play the nerd guru to Screech. As you can see, um, at least I got to do that. Elizabeth ended up breaking her leg in a skiing accident and not being in the episode at all.
Oh wow, there's the great Dustin Diamond there, played Screech Powers as well.
Yeah, it was. And Dustin was a nice kid. I was sad to hear about his father's abuse of his finances and stuff.
Hmm.
But I eventually worked in on another film called Our Feature Presentation that Dustin was in, and followed somewhat his antics with his career, and really sad to hear when he got the cancer and died all way too young.
Way too young. It was, yeah, I was devastated when I heard that. It's obviously like a part of your childhood, like passing away. You grew up watching Saved by the Bell, and to hear that, and obviously I know they've kind of rebooted Saved by the Bell, and I know it's been canned already, but for me, me and Sasha talk about reboots a lot on this show, and we're like, I'm not a massive reboot fan, and when I heard they were rebooting Saved by the Bell, I was like, oh no, 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 no,
Right,
no.
and the fans and creators of Back to the Future are in the same boat.
That
The
will
fans.
never be. If that ever gets rebooted, I think there'll be World War Three.
I had a very gentlemanly fight with Tim Russ, from Star Trek
I
fame.
interviewed him not long ago. Yeah, really
Yeah,
nice guy.
Tim and I got into it over the topic we were at a show, and the topic of a Back to the Future 4 came up. And Tim said, "Yeah, the studios, if they want to, they'll do it." And I was like, "Tim, Zemeckis and Gail, they say no over their dead bodies." And Tim was adamant. He says, if there's enough money, if the studios want to do it, they'll do it. Blah blah. And we, butted heads.
Hmm.
It was okay, and I see his point, and it's probably, down the road they probably will do something, because once again, if they throw enough money at something, people will go to see
Yeah.
it just out of the curiosity of it. So
As
there's
long
some.
as I mean, you've only got to look at things like Snow White that have just come out and the backlash that got. I mean, you could probably multiply that by 1,000 if they ever made Back to the Future
Well, it's
4.
interesting because I have read some friends' reviews, and they thought it was okay. They thought it was good, and then others are like, absolutely not. So it's.
Yeah, I think people like what they like, and I mean that the word woke gets thrown around a lot now in the
Well,
industry.
that's what I endured from the fans with Back to the Future. Crispin fans knew that he wasn't a part of the sequels,
Hmm.
and I was vilified. I have still been, oh, you're the fake George, you asshole, blah, whatever. And I'm like, you know,
Yeah,
that's
just doing
it
my
is what
job.
it is.
You were asked to do a job. Jeffrey, tell us what you're up to these days. What does the current day look like for you, my friend?
Oh, okay. I'm sporting this beard because I have a couple parts that I'm working on, roles that I'm working on. Um, I've got a part in a film that's just now hitting the festival circuit called Siblings, in which I play a very badly behaved patriarch of a family of very badly behaved brothers and sisters. And it's a very dark comedy and very silly, uh, ultra low budget film. But a friend of mine asked me to do it, and I'm happy to help him out. And I have a scene in a film that was in theaters just a few weeks ago and now I guess it's getting ready for streaming, called No Address, which is about homelessness. And the makers of this film have arranged to give 50% of the profits to homeless uh, charities, homeless support centers and such. And so I'm very happy to be a part of just a few scenes in that with Billy Baldwin and Kristen Loken. Am I saying her name right, from the Terminator films?
Hmm.
Uh, and then I also have gigs that I just did one. I've got another coming in June, another one in October, playing Mark Twain.
Wow.
And it's kind of uh, interesting that yeah, you probably know that Val Kilmer passed, I think, just
Yeah,
yesterday.
tragically passed away last night. Such a
And he was
terrible
he
loss.
was playing Mark Twain. The last big thing that I know that he was doing before the cameo in Top Gun sequel, which he was already ailing, was playing Twain. And you know, I'm getting a lot of nice notices when I play Twain. I've been doing lectures and meet greets and trying to develop a stage show as well. I'm playing the great humorist. And then I've got some fan cons on the line. I can't announce just yet, except one in the south of France in mid-May.
Is there going to
So
be
for
some in London anytime soon? That's all. A
uh,
few people have asked me. I told them I was interviewing you, and I was like, asking me if he's coming back to London to do some sort of comic cons. I was like, I'll ask, but you never know.
there is talk. I'll
Okay,
just say there is talk.
okay, we'll keep in
Nothing
touch.
nothing definite yet. The one that I can say is the cosplayers of love, the cosplayers de coeur. My French is dreadful.
Yeah,
Um,
mine's awful.
but in the south of France, in Valence, near Lyon, in I believe it's May 10th through the 12th, is a fan con that's mostly cosplayers.
Wow.
And they've asked me to come. It's partly a fundraiser also for charities.
Hmm.
And the gentleman came to me at London Film and Comic Con a number of years ago named Jean-Louis and said, John Rhys Davies has done our show, so we're very good friends. I'd love to have you there. And this year he's invited me. So I'm going to finally get
Wow.
to the south of France
Well,
for.
enjoy, enjoy. Well, Jeffrey, it's been incredible to have you on our show. Thank you so much. When I found out that I could get to sit down and interview, and like I said to you at the start, I think it's a story that doesn't get told enough of your side of it. And you were just like you said to me at the very start, you were just an actor. You wanted to work. We've all got bills
Yeah,
to pay. You were approached to do a role, and you done it. Little be known to you that you didn't kind of know. Back then, it was kind of you were just throwing in. I mean, a law's been made that can never happen again now. That's it's been
right.
done
And
that can never happen again.
happy to hear that. Yeah, and just a couple quick things. If you know someone or anyone watching has a need for an autograph photo, whatever, you can go to jeffreyweissman.com and look at my store page. I keep my prices at fair market value. Uh, and also on the news page, there's updates. And I'm just very, very happy that you invited me on, Mr. Burrows. I've got to ask, your accent. I can't see if I can do it. Is it Cockney?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I'm like I grew up in London, so I'm like now I live about
That's right.
45 minutes outside of London, and
You're 45 minutes outside of London.
see, there you go. It's not you do know what? You don't sound Australian. I go to America a lot. I'm a
Oh,
big Washington Redskins now Commanders fan, so I go to Washington a lot to watch them play, and I host an NFL podcast. The amount of people that do the impression of me and me and all my English friends look at each other and we're like, we're not from Australia. So you've done well. You don't sound Australian.
oh, that's good.
But Jeffrey, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. I really do appreciate it. If people want to check out this show, just go onto YouTube, completed it pod, all one word into the search bar. That is where you will find us. You can also find us on X is at completed it pod. But I will be back later in the week with another episode. But Jeffrey, thank you very much, my friend. Stay healthy, stay well, keep doing what you're doing, and let me know when you're going to be in London. But this has been
I
another
will.
episode of Completed It. Till next time, everybody, stay safe.